People like to believe money is solid, real, reliable, that the paycheck you earn, the savings you protect, the numbers in your bank account actually mean something permanent. But what if they don't? What if the money you trust can be created out of nothing, expanded without limit, and quietly lose value while you're still working for it? That's not a conspiracy. It's the system we live in. And the turning point already happened almost unnoticed. On the 15th of August, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television and announced that the United States would temporarily stop allowing dollars to be exchanged for gold. It sounded technical, boring, even. A small adjustment. It wasn't. That decision permanently ended the link between money and something tangible. Before that night, dollars were tied to gold, $35 per ounce. After that night, they were backed by trust alone, not metal, not scarcity, just belief. To understand why that matters, we have to rewind. After World War II, the global financial system was built around stability. Under the Bretton Woods system, currencies were tied to the US dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold. It wasn't perfect, but it created discipline. Governments couldn't print endlessly because gold reserves set a limit. But by the late 1960s, America was spending heavily on the Vietnam War and social programs at home. Dollars were flowing around the world, but the gold reserves weren't growing to match them. Other countries began asking for their gold in exchange for their dollars. And the US realized it couldn't keep the promise. So the promise was quietly removed. When Nixon closed the gold window, it was framed as temporary. It never reopened. From that moment on, money became fiat, from the Latin phrase meaning "let it be done." In simple terms, money exists because governments say it exists. And for the first time in modern history, there was no natural limit to how much of it could be created. What's remarkable is how calm everything looked afterward. There were no riots, no immediate collapse. Stores stayed open, paychecks cleared, life went on. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had changed. The system no longer rested on scarcity, it rested on confidence. And history shows us something very clearly. Confidence eventually cracks. This wasn't the first time money drifted away from reality. In ancient Rome, emperors slowly reduced the silver content of their coins to fund wars and luxury. At first, no one noticed. Then, prices rose, trust faded, trade broke down. An empire that once relied on strong currency ended up bartering. Centuries later, in China under the Yuan dynasty, paper money was introduced. It was efficient and convenient, but once rulers realized they could print without limit, the temptation became too strong. Inflation followed. Confidence collapsed. Different centuries, different technologies, same pattern. When money is no longer anchored to something real, those in power gain flexibility, and everyone else inherits the risk. What made 1971 different was scale. The dollar wasn't just America's currency. It was the backbone of the global system. When it left gold behind, the entire world moved into a new monetary era together. At first, it seemed liberating. Central banks could stimulate growth. Governments could borrow freely. Debt became manageable because more money could always be created. And for a while, it worked. Inflation in the 1970s was painful, but later decades felt stable. Economists began to believe central banks could fine-tune the economy. Interest rates went up and down like controls on a machine. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This system runs on expansion. Debt must grow. Money supply must grow. Confidence must hold. If growth slows too much, the structure strains. Since 1971, global debt has exploded. U.S. federal debt alone has risen from a few $100 billion to tens of trillions. Numbers so large they feel abstract. Every major crisis followed the same script. More liquidity, more intervention, more credit. The dot-com crash. The 2008 housing collapse. The 2020 pandemic stimulus. Each time, the answer was expansion. We call it stability, but it's acceleration. And acceleration has consequences. You can see it in purchasing power. An ounce of gold was $35 in 1971. Today, it's thousands. Housing prices have multiplied many times over. Wages have increased, but rarely at the same pace as assets and costs. For many people, the modern financial era feels like this: work more, save harder, and still fall behind. And yet we're told this is normal. It isn't just the United States. Once the dollar untethered from gold, other currencies followed. The global system now floats on policy decisions, interest rate adjustments, and managed perception. And perception works until it doesn't. History offers harsh examples. Weimar Germany printed money to escape war debts. At first, it seemed manageable. Then, prices doubled weekly, savings evaporated, trust collapsed. Argentina has defaulted repeatedly over the past century. Inflation cycles through the economy like seasons. People adapt by holding foreign currency or alternative assets because they no longer trust their own. The pattern is familiar, which raises a difficult question. Why do we assume this time is different? The United States is not immune. Europe is not immune. China is not immune. No modern economy is immune to the fragility of confidence. Money is not a force of nature. It is a human agreement. Once it was shells and salt, then silver and gold, then paper backed by gold. Now it is paper backed by policy, or even digital entries in a database. Each step moves further into abstraction, and abstraction increases vulnerability. Today, governments are exploring central bank digital currencies. They promise efficiency and convenience, but they also allow unprecedented oversight and control. If money is already based on trust, imagine what happens when access to it can be adjusted instantly. Some look to cryptocurrency for answers. Bitcoin was created after the 2008 crisis as a system with fixed supply, enforced by code rather than political decisions. It attempts to restore scarcity, but it remains volatile and contested. It may represent a shift or just another phase in the same long struggle between discipline and expansion. The deeper lesson is not about choosing gold over fiat or Bitcoin over dollars. It's about understanding power. When money is separated from something tangible, those who control issuance gain enormous flexibility. They can borrow, stimulate, rescue, and delay consequences. But consequences do not disappear. They accumulate. Eventually, the cost is paid through inflation, instability, or restructuring. So what do we do? First, we stop pretending money is neutral and permanent. Second, we educate ourselves about economic history. Patterns matter. Systems built purely on confidence are powerful but fragile. Real wealth is not just numbers on a screen. It is resilience, diversification, adaptability, awareness. Because when trust breaks, everything changes. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. Rome's debased coins, China's paper inflation, Weimar's collapse. Each reminds us of the same truth. Once confidence in money is lost, the damage spreads far beyond finance. The day money stopped being real was not just a moment in 1971. It was a shift in how the world works. And whether we notice it or not, we are still living inside that shift.